right. Well, it's been a long time, but welcome to episode 8 of Rude Awakening. And we're going to transition from episode 7 right into 8. Because what we're doing today is we're putting the science to the test. We talked about in episode 7 what the laramide orogeny is. And then if you extend the lines, you realize that if that's the case, you have to put your hypothesis to the test. You have to start looking for what you would see if that was the case, and you're not going to believe what we fucking found. Okay, so episode 8, it's entitled The Spot, and you'll know why here shortly. But what we're doing is we're putting the science to the test. Okay, so let's just recap a little bit as to what episode 7 was about. In episode 7, we talked about the laramide orogeny, and that is the numerous layers and the uplift of limestone is at the top, sandstone below that, limestone, sandstone, and that goes on for 7 or 8 layers that we can actually see above ground surface. What that proves to us is that we had ocean, and then no ocean, and then ocean again, and then no ocean. And what this proves also is that there was a cyclical events that are taking place. So what we did is we said, okay, what could cause the ocean to be up at the 7,500 foot level? Well, we placed that on the shifting of the equatorial bulge. And remember that we have the Earth and the ocean water at the center of the equator is 23 miles higher than at the poles. Okay? So by shifting that equatorial bulge to go in a different direction, it is no problem for the ocean to get up that high in altitude. Okay, so we've proven that in a number of different ways. When Tommy and I went on the expedition to find the 85 million year old giant sea turtles, we know that ocean was in Wyoming, where we were when we found that. We know from the laramide orogeny that the ocean was up here, not only once, not only twice, but again, all we're seeing is 7 to 9 layers of ocean water at that time, and then it would shift again, and then there would be no ocean, so sandstone would build up, shift again, then the ocean would be there, limestone would build up. You're always going to find this wherever you find limestone deposits and basalt. So, that being the case, we also concluded that the Sierra Nevadas, the Rocky Mountains, and what's in Kentucky? Appalachians. Okay? That at some point, those mountains that we know today would have been nothing more than island chains. And if that was the case, and those island chains were there for 12,000 years, civilization would have built up in these particular areas rather than what was covered in ocean. Makes sense? Makes perfect sense, okay? So, here's the thing. We need to put science to the test. So what we did is, armed with that knowledge that these mountaintops were nothing more than island chains, we were looking for areas that ancient civilizations would have lived in. And you're not going to fucking believe what we found. Okay, so let's go into that particular science. The weird thing about knowing the catastrophe cycle and realizing that everything is fitting into place with the catastrophe cycle is that sometimes you're looking in places or you find things long before you even know what they are. So is the case with this. Okay, so here's what happened. Last year, where we are in Red Feather, we were inundated for 3 months with forest fires. Well, the store that I own is basically the hub of the community. And so when the forest fires were getting close, I was tracking them by satellite. And because I want to see how close to town they were getting. The fire department at that particular time asked us to stay until they personally evacuated us. So for about a week, we were the only ones in town. So I kept on looking at satellite images, finding out where the forest fire was and how close it got. As it turned out, it got within a half a mile of town. And finally, the fire department said, pick up, get your shed, and evacuate. Well, in doing that, I accidentally found an anomaly in the geology of the mountains that were around us. And so I marked the GPS coordinates on it, and I said, I got to get up there. Well, the bad thing is that after the forest fire, the forestry department shut down the forest. And it took Tommy and I a year and a half to get to this particular anomaly. And what we found was just absolutely incredible. Okay, before I get into this particular part, because it's going to be amazing and it's going to take some time, we need to do a tally. As you notice, we always keep track of how many shots and beers we have.
Fuck.
Okay, Tommy is at 19 shots for the day and 18 beers.
I'm doing bad.
You know, he's doing great. No one can outdrink Tommy. Look how pathetic I am. 1 shot, and I'm now on my 3rd beer. Okay, that's how pathetic I am as a drinker.
Oh, there he goes.
Yep, I have respect for beer. Remember that phrase, because you're going to need it later. Okay, so we're putting science to the test. We're going to be talking about what we have called the spot. So as I'm going through the satellite imagery, I've always gotten in the back of my mind, okay, if this was an island chain, what we're expecting to see is civilizations at the top of these mountains. Civilizations that go back to at least the Clovis era, 12,000 years ago, and possibly more. Now, in earlier episodes, we talked about some things that have been found in this area. As an example, our good buddy Tom Peden, who is a geologist and is native born to this area, has lived his entire life in this area. He's in his 70s. Was there when they found the 12,000-year-old red-haired mummies close by to where we're at. Other things that have been found up here is cave paintings in this particular area, which we date back to 250 to 300 years. But what we found at the spot is much, much older than these things. And we'll explain why here in a second. Okay, so we've already found a number of archaeologically historical sites in this area, some dating back as far as 12,000 years. So we expected that if this was true, that these mountains were island chains, we would find things that were at least 12,000 years old and possibly more. We were not disappointed. Took us a year and a half to get up to those GPS coordinates, and it is absolutely amazing. All right, now I am not going to tell anyone where this place is. Here's why. What we found up there is absolutely amazing. We do not want it to be contaminated. We want to take our time, look at it very scientifically. We want to map everything out, which we've already done a lot of at this point. And we want to keep the integrity of the site. So we're not going to tell anyone where this is. I'm not going to give you GPS coordinates, but I will tell you what we found. It's very, very important. We have already been in contact with probably the most preeminent Mayan scholar on the face of this earth. A man who has spent decades studying Mayan history, probably 40 years down in Central and South America. He has written a number of books that are still being used to teach Mayan history to this day at very prestigious universities. We've already talked to him about it. He has seen the footage that we're going to show you tonight, and his exact words were, "You've got a tiger by the tail, don't let anyone know about it." And this is a man who has made amazing discoveries over those decades. He has gone from Central and South America all the way over to the Middle East to support the theories of the evidence of what he has found over the years. Okay, so here's what we found. The spot consists of a crater. Some would call it a diamond tube. When we first discovered this, the only way we could find it was by climbing the top of this crater. That crater sits 85 feet high. I measured it. The only way into this particular crater is about a 15 to 20 foot wide path. So if you're wandering around the area, the last thing you're going to want to do is climb this. But we found a path into it. And when we got into it, it was absolutely amazing.
And your big white ass.
My big white ass. You're going to love that part.
Scott. Oh shit, I did not mean to capture that.
Okay. In this particular crater, this crater sits about 500 feet, you think, Tommy?
Yeah.
In circumference.
Yeah.
Okay? The cliffs are about 85 feet high. You only have about a 15 to 20 foot wide entrance to this place. On one side, where the 85 foot cliffs are, we're going to show you a picture of that here. And then on the other side is another set of cliffs. Now here's the interesting thing. The first thing that we did when we got up to the top of it, because I knew what I was going to, and I want you to keep in mind, it's only a half a mile from the nearest road, but it takes us 3.5 hours to hike it, because we have to go over 2 very steep ridges in order to get to this place. The only reason we found it is because I found it on satellite. We had GPS coordinates. So it's way out in the middle of nowhere. We climbed up the cliff on the first day, and I knew that if this had acoustical properties, it would be a sacred site to Native Americans. So I brought instruments to test all that. So I took a Bluetooth speaker at the very top of that cliff, and I put it on a rope, and I dropped it down the side of the cliff. And using my phone, we were playing things like Buddhist chants and Native American music and Tool, because we love Tool, and to test out the sound qualities. Now in the meantime, while I was up there setting that up, my son was here. There is a lake in the front of this. My son was here towards the center. Tommy was way up on the other side of the cliff from there. The funny thing is that we could hear the speaker that I was using in the center of the cliff and over on this edge of the cliff, as if they were standing right next to it. But it didn't really sink in until we realized that when we were talking to each other to test this out, we were talking in normal voice, and even though it was 500 feet across, we could hear each other just as if we were standing next to each other. So the acoustical properties of this place is just absolutely amazing. So now we're thinking, okay, whenever a site like that is found, it would have been used as a sacred site by Native Americans. So we continued to test it. So we took the speaker from this side of the cliff, we put it right in the center of the cliff. And then we walked all the way around this area, and the sound was absolutely perfect, as if we were standing right next to it, except for one spot. That spot was right here. This is what we call the King's Chair. And when you're in the King's Chair, which is at the top of the cliff, the sound doubles. And we were just absolutely amazed that this was going on. So now I'm going to draw a side view of the King's Chair. What we found was this. We had the King's Chair, which was carved out of the stone. Below the King's Chair is 3 different levels. Each one of those levels is made by slabs of granite that were turned vertical and then filled in with dirt. What it created was a 3-level amphitheater. So now we knew we have an amphitheater. What were they watching? What they were watching was what was going on this particular cliff, because it's directly across from it. The sound qualities were absolutely perfect. So now we're looking at the cliff. What was so special about this cliff? This is the one that you see up here, and this is a close-up of it. Okay, I'm going to erase that for a second. Let that sink in. So now, what we have is we have an 85-foot ridge. What we found on this ridge was cave painting of a horse right here. So we date that cave painting at about 250 to 300 years old. We found 40 feet up the top of that cliff was a rabbit. Also, we found my crude picture of it, a hummingbird. These were not cave paintings. These are rock carvings. And it's very clear as day, and you'll see the video of that. But that's what's up there on that cliff. Over to this side, what we find is 2 faces. I'm going to draw this one a little to the side because this one faces this one. Okay? Each one of them have a hat that looks like a feathered hat. One's facing the other. And then down here, what was it, another rabbit?
Yeah.
Yeah, another rabbit. Down here, close to where this is the level of the lake. Okay? Here. So now, we find evidence of human civilization. Yeah, this goes back to 250 to 300 years. We understand that. We found, not us personally, but there has been found cave paintings in this area before. But it's the rock carvings that are amazing, because that dates it back about
24. 24,000 years?
Well, if it is what we think it is, and I'll explain why we think it is this, it would go back about 10 to 12,000. But we believe this is much older. And the reason is because of the artistry, the way that they carved it out here. The other things that I'm going to be talking about here probably go back as far as 24,000 years. Same thing with these carvings of these Indian heads and this one down here. Okay, now I'm going to erase this again, and I'm going to explain to you the other thing that we found. So I said that this 85-foot ridge that I personally climbed has a lake at the very bottom of it. Have cave painting here, you got your rabbit and your hummingbird here. So when we wade out into this lake, there is a distinct, about a 7 to 10 degree temperature differential between the horse head and the rabbit. Okay, now, when you stand in the water, we know that the temperature changes. It's about every 20 seconds, but it will drop and rise during that time and just continually do that. So what we know is that there is a current that is flowing from here to here. We have not yet been able to dredge under there. Keep in mind how far it is. We go up there with 65 to 85 pound backpacks, so it's really hard for us to get equipment up there. But that current is continuous. And so we know there's something under this ridge. We'll explain that a little bit later as well. Okay, so we've already established at this point that it has tremendous acoustical properties. We've already established at this point that there's evidence of that man has been there before. An interesting thing about this particular place is whenever we go up there, our cameras shut off, our phones stop working, but only when we take the instrument and we set it on the rock. So we know that the rock is magnetic. We discovered evidence of this. We said we had to climb over 2 giant cliffs to get through there. In between that is a valley. That begins when we did our magnetic testing in the valley, which is still probably a quarter of a mile from the discovery. We know that magnetic properties start at that point. And when you get up to the top, well, first of all, in the valley, even if you take an analog compass and you take a digital compass, they point exactly the opposite. When you get up to the spot, they actually will spin in circles. So we know we have magnetic rock up there. Okay, so now we're going to look for geological oddities, some of which we'll talk about here tonight in that area. Okay, so even though we were successful finally in getting video footage up there, normally our video cameras will shut down, our phones will shut down in that particular area. So again, another anomaly that we're looking for. Here's the problem. We hike up there for the day, and because it takes 3.5 hours to get up there, another 2 to get downhill, we don't have a whole lot of time to spend up there. So we decided to camp. And when we camped, everything took on a whole different perspective. Because now we had a chance to look at the site in the night sky, and we had a chance to enjoy the energies of the spot. So let me talk about the energies for a second. Here's the weird thing. I had a heart attack 2 years ago, and I'm going to be 60 this year. Tommy, where are you? Mid-40s?
I think I'm 45.
45, mid-40s, okay? But here's the deal. You would imagine after that treacherous hike that we would be totally exhausted, and we'd have to sit down and rest for a while, and we'd have aches and pains. Here's the weird thing. We have brought 7 people up to this spot already. And when we get there, every bit of body pain disappears. Completely. I am not kidding. I know what body pain is because I go through it every day. It disappears, and that has been the experience of every single person that we have brought up there. But when you leave the crater, it comes back. And we have not quite yet figured out that spot. We've had the water tested. It's perfectly clean to drink, although there's a lot of minerals in it.
Tastes like vegetables.
Tastes like vegetables, Tommy, because he drank it. Basically, anything that was plant life up there, Tommy has eaten up there already. So we'll get into that later. You'll probably see that in one of the videos. But anyways, the feeling of the place is just absolutely tremendous. And every single person that we brought up there has said the same thing time and time again. We don't ever want to leave. It's just absolutely invigorating and peaceful. All right, so we haven't really figured out the spot. We don't know why it is that we feel no pain up there and then it comes back. But there's something about this particular spot that we have. Okay, let me give you an example of that. Remember, we have the crater, 500 feet across. We have the 85-foot ridge. We have the King's Chair here and the amphitheater underneath it. Okay? Just to this side of the crater is a spot. That particular spot was very unique because when we got up there, every single tree, and I'm not kidding, every single tree in this particular spot has been hit by lightning. And nowhere else in this crater is there evidence of trees getting hit by lightning. So much so that the trees were twisted and burned down the inside of them. And so we know that something anomalous is going on in this particular spot. And I'm going to let Tommy talk about his experience with what he saw going on in this particular place. Let me go back to the King's Chair for a minute. Okay, remember what we had was we had the King's Chair carved out. We had 3 different levels of stones that were turned upright and then filled in with dirt as seating. What I didn't tell you is that on this side there is a ramp going to the King's Chair. And on this side, there is a ramp going to the King's Chair. So what they did is they made this particular place accessible for a lot of people. Everyone else could just sit here, but you had these 2 ramps that were going up there. Okay, and again, I'm going to let Tommy talk about this particular spot so that you'll understand why all those trees were hit by lightning.
So it was a couple years before Scott had found this in the same spot. I saw something in the sky that looked like an octopus with tentacles coming down. And it was amazing. I thought maybe it was aliens or something, crazy like that. But find out there were sprites. So finding that out, I'm like, okay. Well, actually, I had done a drawing a couple years ago with the sprites, which I can't find. It's somewhere in one of my notebooks. But I thought it was just some crazy anomaly. But once I found that out, I started looking sprites up more and more. And I was like, holy cow. So I swear to God, it was like in that same place that Scott found. And so I started doing some research. got on Google Earth, mapped it out, tried to figure out the degrees from our house to the spot, and it matched right up once I figured it all out. I was like, holy crap, so that spot with all the lightning going to it, it had sprites coming out of it, and I saw it years before. And so I believe it's a charging station. It's got all that magnetic charge. When we speak in it or put music into the amphitheater, it's really loud, but if you go outside the wall, it just disappears. I mean, it's just mute. There's no sound. It shoots straight to the sky. So with these frequencies and everything in this amphitheater that shoot up, plus the lightning with the sprites going up, it's got to be a charging station. Alien ships, charging alien ships. I mean, we have healing water and everything else, so why wouldn't it?
Okay, so we talked about the lake, we talked about the energies that were up there, the fact that all the rock is magnetic. We talked about the acoustical properties of the crater. But we had to go camping because we just weren't able to spend a whole lot of time there. And the footage, or actually the pictures that you'll see here of the Milky Way that comes right down through the center of that crater is just absolutely amazing. And it lends itself to the fact that this is a sacred site. So again, we're looking for evidence of human habitation in this particular area. What we found in this area is absolutely stunning. When we got up to this particular area, this was on day 2 of the camping trip, what we noticed, and we have a picture of it, that there was numerous granite stones of different sizes that were laid next to each other in patterns. As an example, we have a number of stones that were laid out that were rectangular, and each one of them was about 1 foot by 6 foot, as if they were building a road. Then we had numerous stones that were laid out in blocks of different sizes, and again they were laid out in geometrical patterns. Because this is a very old site, we date it in the rock carving somewhere around 24,000 years. We were wondering why all these granite stones were up there. It appeared that what they were doing is they were building something. Well, extend the line, follow the science. It's not only about what they were building, but how the hell they were doing it. So what we found was this, and again, we're going to put pictures up in this. In the crater, 85-foot cliff, King's Chair is here, lake is here, all the way around it. Rabbit and hummingbird, horsehead, Indian heads right here. Another rabbit was right here at lake level. But this particular section here is cut out sheer, meaning it is absolutely straight going all the way down on both sides and back into the crater. This crater, don't get me wrong, it actually is about that wide. If you're walking it, it's about 30 feet wide. But this one section is cut out. And we couldn't quite figure it out because all the stones are a different material than the rest of this crater. And we were wondering why the hell are all these stones sitting here? And the stones are big, giant pieces of granite, probably weigh somewhere in the 3 to 5 ton range. And these big stone granites are also placed all the way around the edge of this lake, and then you'll find some inside the lake. So what we had to do is we had to explain why we had all these road stones and all these wall stones that were sitting up here on this side of the ridge. Because they didn't come from the ridge. That was obvious. They were at a place. They came from this ridge and were moved up to this particular side. Some of them were so square that it was absolutely impossible for them to be geometric, or excuse me, natural. Some of them were in what's called a keystone. That is, they would have served as a cornerstone. And again, the same thing. They were, geometric, sharp right angles, again, found up in this area. So we're wondering what were they doing and where did they get the stones from? What we found, and we'll show you a picture of that here, is that a number of these rocks that are down here on the edge, say you had it there, were cut into these geometric patterns. And you'll see in the photos that we're showing you that they're cut like this. They were cut exactly as stones that would have been used up there. And we took a long time. We looked at the stone carvings. These are not natural fractures. They don't go deep enough. What we have here is sections of these stones that were dug down. How the hell they did it, we have no clue at this point. To where these geometric patterns, the cuttings in them only go down about 1/4 of an inch. None of them go through the rock. So they were obviously cut from these stones and then brought up to this area. Again, it's anomalous. It's very clear where they came from because they're the same stones as the ones that were cut out here, but they were brought up to this area to build something. Okay, so now our camping trip comes to an end. We had a fantastic time up there. The energies were a little weird. It's like it was extremely peaceful, but all throughout the day we would have things going on. As an example, when I was up here at the top of this ridge and Tommy was over here 500 feet away at the King's Chair, we heard this tremendous guttural growling going on. And when I was here, I thought it was just off to the side of me. Tommy was here, he heard it full force, just as loud as I did. And when we both climbed down and we met in the center of the crater, Tommy's like, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, man, I thought it was right next to me." He says, "I thought it was right next to me over in this area." So again, we have this very peaceful atmosphere, no body aches and everything. And yet at the same time, we're getting this feeling like something doesn't want us there. We don't know what it is, but it has happened on numerous occasions while we were up there, especially at night. Night was scary as shit.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. And let me tell you, every one of the dogs, we had 3 dogs up there. Every one of the dogs were just nervous as shit. And so something else was going on up there. We haven't quite discovered what that is yet, but we're going to. We're going to spend more and more time in this particular area. All right, so now putting the science to the test. So now we got all this footage. We got all these photographs. We have all these experience. We have these rock carvings. We got the rock paintings. We got the Indian heads. We got the current coming out from the edge of the crater there. And it seems to us, just by the current, that there's something under there. So, during the camping trip, on the 85-foot ridge, where we have the horse head and the rabbit and the hummingbird in the lake. Stupid as I am, I decided I was going to climb the cliff. Which I did.
Badass.
Yeah. In this particular area where we have all the sheer cutting of the cliff and all the stone piles at the bottom, I climbed up to the top of that, which sits at about 35 feet. And I looked down. And even though I was sitting at 35 feet, what I saw in the rifts of the cliffs ran to about 60 feet. So I know that these rocks are covering something. There's something under there. We have not been able to get to it because all these fucking rocks weigh, several tons. We haven't been able to find a way to get in there other than doing a visual inspection. We have not yet got to the point yet why this current is going on. We've gone in with GoPros, videotaped everything, and unfortunately we're going to have to dredge this out in order to find what the hell is under there. But there's something under there. This water is coming up from this point, flowing over to this side and dissipating. The temperature changes are always in the same direction. So we're going to get to that. But having amassed enough video footage and photography and experiences up there, we had a very unique opportunity. And that was we came in contact with a very eminent archaeologist. One who teaches at a very eminent university, who just happened to be up in this area doing studies on Mayan and Sumerian cultures. He was doing a lot of work with in the DNA field on tracking the history of humankind. We had an opportunity to sit down with him for an hour. We showed him all the video footage, we showed him all the pictures, and his exact words were, "You've got a tiger by the tail. Don't let anyone know about this." Meaning, don't show him the spot. So, here we have the rabbit and the hummingbird. Okay? In his experience, decades of experience traveling the earth, he says the hummingbird and the rabbit are the symbols of Mayan entrance to Popol Vuh. Popol Vuh is the Mayan underworld. We were just totally floored. When he saw the video footage of it, he immediately knew what it was. It wasn't like, well, this could be a rabbit and hummingbird. He knew exactly what it was without us even telling him. He says, this marks the entrance to the underworld. And we were totally floored. And then he gave us instructions on how to proceed further, which is what we're going to do. We believe that these rocks were cut and an entrance to something was buried at this point. We know that these stones were used for roadways and walls, and we even found pillars up there that were moved. We don't know how they cut the stone at this point, although we suspect from talking with other geologists just recently that it was done using meteorites as cutting tools for the granite, which is what they have found in their field over the decades. So whatever it is, we've got this amazing spot. And how did we find this spot? By putting science to the test. What you learned in episode 7 regarding the shift of the equatorial bulge led us to understand that these mountaintops in the Sierras, the Rockies, and the Appalachians were really an island chain.
Those look like penises.
Yes, well, they would if I did this. Yes, they would definitely look like penises.
Definitely.
Okay, and then you got the whole squirty thing. Okay, I feel sorry for the people in California. That explains a lot, doesn't it? But the shift in the equatorial bulge created these island chains on a cyclical basis over and over again. So we knew to concentrate on the tops of these mountains above that last layer of limestone for evidence of ancient civilization. And with the spot, I believe we found it.